Hi there. I had to re-edit another video because after my last video I realized that, well, maybe because of the fact that I was following the crowd, I was getting into a rut that I really didn't want to get into. So, with this video, I'd like to very briefly talk a little bit more about composition and where this will be going in the future. You may notice behind me, hopefully it's still playing, yes, there's a slideshow. The slideshow is the Lego Me slideshow. It's not complete, it's just a few of the images. You might remember, if you've looked through my videos, that this started a couple of years ago, about the time, not long after actually I started doing videos, when my son's fiance suggested that since I was going on a trip, I might try something that she saw in a posting online. She sent me a link to a guy who took a toy dinosaur with him, and whenever he went on a trip, and took pictures of the toy dinosaur, just like the people who take, things like lawn gnomes and so on. So I thought about it and I said, well, I wonder what I could bring. And then my other son came up with Lego Me. Basically, he's a Lego collector, and he took the bits and pieces to build a Lego man that resembled me as much as he could. So this sort of tabletop experiment, well, not always on a tabletop. As you can see, there are images that were taken by a pool in Mexico. There are all sorts of things. This got me thinking a lot again about composition, because here I have a lot more control. Composition, remember, composition for a photographer is far different from composition for a musician or a musical composer or a writer or a painter. Basically, those three people start with a clean slate. They start with an empty sheet. The musical composer has to come up with the music and then get it down in a form where it's permanent. The writer has a blank piece of paper. Now, some people say, well, nowadays it's a blank computer screen. So be it, but it's still blank. They get to fill in what they need to make their story. The painter starts with a blank canvas. They get to fill in what they need to make the story, make the painting. The photographer has all this mess to deal with. And instead of deciding what goes into an image, they have to carefully compose to keep things out of the image. So more than anything else, probably the most important part about composition, and what I will be stressing in future, is learning how to get the right things in the image, not to have it cluttered up with too much. Simplicity is, I think, probably the #1 step towards good composition. In previous videos, I have talked about the rules. Now, some people sort of poo-poo the rules and say, don't be silly, you don't need rules, does it look good? But they forget about the fact that probably the reason why it looks good is that even if it's only by accident, rules were followed. These rules are actually just guidelines based on what people have found pleasing for the past, literally thousands of years. Things like proportion, the golden mean, which I talked about in an earlier video. I mean, that's something that the ancient Greeks used when they built things like the Acropolis. So, I mean, we're talking about something that's been around for a long time. And it wasn't because somebody made this a rule and said, this is what it must be. Instead, it's what we discovered was pleasant to look at, what was good to look at. It's like, in mathematics, people will look at a number like pi, and they say 3.14 and all those other digits. Why can't we just round it off to 3? Because they don't know where the number came from. They think somebody came up with this wonderful number in their head and look at all the things it can do. When in actual fact, all that happened is somebody measured the distance around the circle, measured the diameter, divided the two, and came up with 3.1415, and so on, and so on, and so on. It is part of nature. It is not an invented number. It's something that exists in every perfect circle. So composition and the rules of composition are just something that exists in every image. If the image is pleasant to look at, then there is something about that composition that works. And maybe it follows the rules, maybe it doesn't. I think before I end this video, there's two things I'd like to mention. First of all, one of the big things I'm striving for more than anything else is simplification, to simplify my image, to get it down to just the bare essentials. Because if you can simplify your image, then you've got something that I think has more impact. Better use of negative space. Negative space looks good in the right image. I'm going to try harder to get that working. Not relying on bokeh, not relying on throwing all the background out of focus so that it's not distracting. I mean, that's basically, when you think about it, it's kind of just a trick to make up for the fact that we haven't maybe composed it as well as we should. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that. Far from it. In many images, it looks great. Sometimes you use it because you have no alternative. There is no way you can deal with the background, so you throw it out of focus. Other times, it's because you really want to separate your subject, like in a portrait. But when it gets overused, when you look at, picture after picture after picture from someone, and they all basically look the same, then, they're not putting their subject in context. They're just doing the same thing all the time. And all I can say about that is, you can overdo anything. So that's not something I'm going to be making much use of. In fact, for my Micro Four Thirds camera, which is what I use most of the time, the fastest lens I have is this 25-1.7. It can do a pretty decent job of throwing things out of focus. The 60mm f2.8 is not too bad. But neither one of them is a match for a full-frame camera with, an 85mm f1.4 or even an f1.2. So I'm not going to push myself to do something that I don't have the equipment to do properly. And faking it in software, well, that truly is a last resort. If you have to save an image, by save I mean rescue, if you have to rescue an image in post-processing, then maybe you should have just tossed it and moved on. All right, so in future, a lot less about gear. If I get a new lens, if I get a new piece of equipment, yes, I'm going to talk about it. But other than that, I think you've seen right now pretty much everything that I have here. And I think everybody could benefit more by looking at images, by examining what's in an image, by taking a look at the composition that they're producing, and basically maybe learning some techniques that might help with that composition. So, if you like this video, give me a like. If you would like to see more of my videos, please subscribe. And of course, if you think someone might get something useful from this video, then by all means share it. Bye for now.